It's about 11:30. I think everybody who is going to be here is here, so we'll go ahead and get started while everybody's settling in with lunch and unpacking.
Okay, I just have I'll kick it off.
Please do.
Okay. Good morning, everyone. We don't have any significant updates for commission since your last meeting, and we've been busy with the day-to-day work and preparing for the upcoming launch of the city's comprehensive plan. We've been wrapping up a couple special projects, and we've also been engaging with our consultants on the Unified Development Ordinance as they work through their code audit. And we've been working on finalizing the county's first comprehensive plan annual report. So we'll look forward to sharing more details with you on these projects at a future meeting. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Aubrey on our staff, who's going to give you an overview of our annual our annual facts and figures report, which you all should all have a copy in front of you. If you don't, just let me know.
It is development activity, not facts and figures.
Okay, annual development activity.
We had a few delays on this one, that's why. Thanks, Amy. So the development activity report covers multiple indicators that we use that are related to investment in Knox County throughout the 2024 calendar year. So we produce an update of this report every spring, and we've been doing so since the 80s. These annual updates allow us to track trends as they arise and keep an eye out on what specific changes are coming to our communities. In this report, we review and summarize all the building permits that are submitted throughout the county, as well as the rezonings and subdivisions that come through our office. Hit the next slide. Thank you. So a lot of the data in this report reference these 12 planning sectors. We've been reporting development data at the sector level for decades. So we have an extensive historical record of these sub-county areas. This year, we did start reporting things more at a jurisdictional level as well, mainly so that we can help answer questions related to the county's new comprehensive plan. Over the past several years, if we were to give out prizes for the sector with the most development activity, it would look a little bit like this. However, this year, almost nothing came out the way that previous trends looked. So it's a little interesting to see what this year looks like. As usual, we'll start with the number of units permitted. Residential was way up over 2020, 53.9% over 2020 numbers, while non-residential was down, but only by 1.4%. This year, Central City managed to edge out Northwest County in permitted units. So at just 15 units more than Northwest County, Central City would earn the hypothetical first place. But let's come back to look at this detail in a second. So compared to last year's distribution, we can see a huge uptick in development in the Central City compared to 2023. We see a moderate drop in the Northwest County from the previous year. However, they still remain the second highest performer. Comparing Knoxville to the unincorporated county, we can also see that 2023 was a year dominated by development outside of city limits, whereas the opposite was true in 2024. We could take a closer look to explain what this reversal of fortune was caused by. So almost all of the units permitted were for residential use. We report residential units by 4 types of structure: single-family detached, multifamily, mobile homes, and single-family attached. And one trend that's cropped up in more recent years is a surge in multifamily housing. Student housing developments in particular within city limits account for a really sizable percentage of that investment. And here we can finally get a glimpse of where some of these units are coming from that made Central City stand out so much this past year. So the hub in Knoxville is a student housing development on Cumberland, and it's reporting 502 housing units just in 2024 alone. And they actually have 4 different buildings, and they'll be phased opening. So that's not even all of the housing units for it. And then the Mark is another student housing development in Central City, and that's adding another 291. So that's a ton of units just for those 2 buildings alone. In non-residential units, we see a distribution that isn't dissimilar from the total units. However, there are a couple of differences, including Southwest County standing out in a way that they didn't in the residential area, and more equal distribution among all the other sectors. The Sunsphere's new visitor center was one example of a really high-profile non-residential unit that is an example of how one single non-residential unit can represent a huge investment for an area. So this one addition to an existing structure represents over $1 million investment and a new tourism attraction for the city. So where are these investments going in? In this map, a larger dot indicates a larger number of units. This is just a residential building activity map. So one really interesting trend that's pretty obvious this year is that there's a sizable development that has occurred along some of the county's major east-west transportation corridors, looking especially at Emory Road and Hardin Valley Road. You can actually kind of trace them just looking at the dots on the map. Also visible on this map is the concentration of development in the central city right near the UT campus area, for perhaps obvious reasons. And we'd like to look at 10-year trends in this report. This is one where we look at all the new units permitted countywide over the past 10 years, split into residential, up here in green, and non-residential in the dark blue on the bottom. So non-residential development has been a small but consistent share of our local development in the past 10 years. So it's stayed a pretty flat line for the most part. 2015 sort of marks the end of the Great Recession hangover. So looking at this line is a pretty good indication of what development has looked like since the Great Recession. While there was a slight downturn over here at the peak of COVID in 2020, the impacts weren't particularly detrimental on residential development, and there certainly has been no lingering effects. We can see a pretty steep increase over the past 4 years. We could probably consider it more of a hiccup on the greater timeline. This is the same data, but with an added 5-year moving average here in the blue line. That helps take out some of that noise and smooths it out. We can smooth out those outlier years. And here we can see an even clearer upward trend of residential units being permitted. It's clear that despite some fluctuation between 2017 and 2020, the average number of units being added has been increasing pretty clearly over the past decade. This chart has the value of new construction over the past 10 years, and it's been adjusted for inflation to 2024 dollars. 2023 and 2024, here at the top, have been breakaway years compared to the previous 8 years in this chart. They've been much larger leaps in investment than in previous years. And in fact, over the past year, investment in new construction leapt by $335 million, bringing the total of this year's investment to $1.8 billion spent on new construction alone.
Question on, is that value, is that based on assessed value, or is that based on like self-reported value from developers? How is that attained?
That's what's reported in the building permit itself.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you. So the value of new renovation, or the value of renovations is in this chart. And this shows a lot less reactivity, but the investment in residential renovations is higher than it was in most previous years in the decade. Sanitary laundry is a good example over here of a big renovation project. So in building permits for this past year, they were spending $2.6 million so far out of the $8.2 million that they're expected to spend. We can move on into rezonings. We see another unexpected result compared to previous years. So South County had the most acres rezoned, although Northwest County still had the highest number of cases. And there wasn't really much going on in the city sectors in comparison. The city rezonings are typically fewer and lower acreage just because there's fewer greenfield opportunities, if that makes sense. And the 3 largest rezonings of the cases of the year were all in South County, accounting for this large amount of acreage. This one was a little bit more predictable. So Northwest County is at the top of both subdivision lots and subdivision cases. So finally, we're looking at all of these subdivision lots altogether. New residential lots produced by subdivisions is really catching up to the pre-pandemic levels now. And this is an interesting and potentially optimistic barometer for the future residential development, for demand for housing units and demand for fulfilling the inventory needs. And also, kind of a fun fact, these numbers are used to help project future student enrollment throughout the county. So we use these for multiple things. So this is where I would normally ask you if local expectations were met this year. So Northwest County was still at the top of pretty much everything, or near the top. Southwest County investment was much quieter than previous years. And some of the other county sectors did have places where they were highlighted a few times, which is something we've been seeing for a few years in a row now. And then Central City had the most development activity of all the city sectors. So if we can call back to those like state fair awards, Northwest County would get an award, South County, as well as Central City for each of the places where they all stood out. So I'm happy to answer any questions you guys might have.
For construction on UT campus, when they do dormitories, is that considered residential or is that non-residential?
That would be residential, but we don't report it because they don't submit building permits.
So none of the campus on UT is included in this?
None of their actual campus buildings come in. Yep.
Okay.
Question regarding kind of, you mentioned, projection. Like, do we ever look at these numbers relative to like, the numbers that come out of like the Boyd Center at UT for like county growth projections and say, okay, well, if we think by 2050 we're gonna have a population of X, how many units per year on average would we need to potentially satisfy that? I think that would be an interesting line graph overlay if we assumed, I don't know what it is, 3 residents per unit or whatever the number is. And
We talk. Yeah,
oh, sorry, go ahead.
We talk about this a lot with the Boyd Center. They actually request from us our building permit numbers, and we provide it for their projections.
Okay. Well, and I guess, is there a way to think about that in reverse too? Just not saying that it's this body's responsibility to ensure that we're tracking that growth projection, but how do we think about that?
Commissioner, that's been discussions that we've had internally. There are other, like Nashville, I think, is doing some of that analysis. We have not done that here, but
Okay.
we have discussed it. Yes.
Thanks.
Anything else?
Yeah, I think that would be great information. And it's interesting to see, because the University of Tennessee has just done a fabulous job. As you were saying, it's interesting because they're not counting the dormitories, but there's that huge push right in there for Central City, but it's all the stuff down on the Strip, on Cumberland Avenue. There's just been so many new apartments built down there, but they need it. I mean, it's 38,000 plus students, and they're still trying to grow it. So it's interesting. It's a bit skewed because that's more of a temporary housing for the students to roll through. So I think there's still a need. We're still behind on providing lots and residential units if it's apartments or townhomes or single-family detached as well. But just kind of making a comment about that. It's a little skewed, I think, from all the apartments that have been built in the Central City for students only. So just more of a comment.
I wondered, to the county fair ribbons, if that is an accurate representation of where the buildable opportunities are, or if that is just a reflection of where the activity is happening at the moment.
It seems to be just where those applications are submitted, so where people want to put stuff, I guess.
Yeah, and I think that's market-driven mainly. I mean, is there an opportunity? Is there something for sale? Something comes for sale? But as you mentioned, from a greenfield perspective, we're seeing a lot of applications like that out in South Knoxville. A lot of green space out there where acreage-wise, I think you were showing acreage-wise, I think it was in South area, was more acreage but less applications, but it's just larger tracts.
Yeah, I just kind of wondered in terms of mapping that for the city, county, the whole area, if what we're seeing is strictly market-driven, or if there are opportunities in terms of available land and such that's just not been tapped. That's what I was trying to get at.
Yeah, and I think that comes back into the plan that we came up with on the comprehensive plan and all that, where we're trying to push growth. And South is, in a planned growth area where we're expecting and anticipating and wanting more growth to happen there. But my experience with that type of thing is certainly market-driven. If there's a farm and there's children, they went to school, graduated from the University of Tennessee, and then they moved to Wisconsin or wherever to take a job. They don't want to farm, they don't want to come back and run the family farm, unfortunately. And then it goes up for sale, and that's, that normal kind of churn like that. Or somebody just wants to sell an investment like that. But it's hard. I know they get letters every day from developers too of saying, hey, will you sell your farm? Will you allow us to build houses on it? So it's a little of both, but I think the market is a big part of that.
I was just going to say, I think Commissioner Adams, to your point, it'd be interesting. It's like you would hope in the future that those ribbons would be on the places that this body is like kind of tagged for like growth. So where those planned growth areas are.
Yeah, exactly. And those planned growth would be the things that the plan has sort of identified, but also where there is a good opportunity for that. And instead of it strictly being just market.
So again, the purposes of this is just to report out what has been happening over the past year. That's the goal of this particular work. Thank you, Aubrey.
Thank you.
Okay, we're going to move on to our review of agenda items. The first one is item number 6. As you all recall, this one was postponed last month to allow for additional analysis and input, and staff has done further analysis and taken into consideration some additional input, and this has resulted in further refinement of the proposed amendments. And I'll turn over to Lindsay to cover that.
Okay, so these are 7C25OA's updates to the middle housing standards that were postponed last month for further evaluation. So just as a refresher, the standards were approved by the Planning Commission in December 2023 and adopted by Council in February 24. So since then, planning staff have had 18 months to work through the standards. We've reviewed potential projects, formal applications. There have been 63 applications to the previous month, over 60 pre-application meetings, and numerous phone calls and emails. So that's all to say that the code amendments that are in front of you are based on extensive collaboration among planning and plans review and inspections, engineering, law department staff related to the applications received, but also related to the amendments themselves. At the request of the Planning Commission, we've completed a pretty extensive review as a staff group to ensure that the amendments can incorporate public comment, further analysis of past application data and relevant lot width data, and also input from stakeholders. Also, as a reminder, the annual report was prepared in March 2024. That was presented at the agenda review then and shared online that same month. And so there were potential code amendments discussed at that time. So the Planning Commission was primed on this in March, and then the proposed code amendments were shared online 3 weeks before the July meeting. So they've been online since mid-June. And I'll just refer you back to that annual report on our website for additional context. So with all of that in mind, I'm just going to run through the changes that have been made since the last meeting and speak to some of the points that were discussed at the July meeting. If you have questions about any of the amendments I don't discuss in the agenda review today, feel free to reach out, and I have slides and additional information on those as well. So one of the main ones here, we've incorporated some additional revisions to lot width where possible. So now duplexes through fourplexes may be accommodated on 40-foot wide lots minimum with an alley, and 45-foot minimum without alleys. And then we've further reduced the minimum lot width for the 2-story duplex option to 35 feet with an alley and 40 feet without an alley, recognizing that a 2-story building may be more narrow. So there is a necessary balance here because we want to accommodate the efficient use of the remaining lots, but we also don't want to force applicants to have to seek variances for their projects, or also force applicants to construct buildings that are unlivable, that are extremely narrow, that may just fit in the lot strangely. And so the chart that is on the screen now shows that the total lots, this is total, not just vacant lots, where the standards are applicable, goes from 87.05% to 91.61% with the proposed code amendments. So that's a pretty good amount of lots that could accommodate some form of middle housing. I would also take this opportunity to provide the reminder that the TDR lots that are eligible for middle housing, they comprise only 28% of the city. So that's that top line on the chart. And not all of those are vacant. So just to reiterate, the intent of these code amendments right now is to propose minor tweaks for clarity and for consistency within the code. The intent of the code amendments are not to be a silver bullet for the city's housing crisis. We're working with 28% of the lots. Not all of those are vacant. We actually, just about 1,800 are vacant. There were also some inaccurate discussions of data last month that we wanted to address. At one point, it was stated that a third of last year's middle housing projects were on non-conforming lots of record. That's not accurate. We wanted to clarify that only 12 out of 50 lots were not in conformance with the lot width, the base zoning's lot width. So that's 24%. And only 3 projects from the first year would not fit the lot requirements of the proposed standards. So again, it's a relatively small number there. 12 out of 50 were not in conformance with that lot width. And that's a little bit more related to the non-conforming lot of record amendments that were in front of y'all last month. But we did just want to clarify there. So the intent, again, as we're looking at these numbers, the intent of the middle housing standards is not to fit a multi-unit building on each lot in the TDR land use area, but it's to add just another tool to the toolbox where those middle housing units actually fit. Another element that has been updated that was a pretty big item of focus at last month's meeting was the requirement for building wall recesses or projections in elevations longer than 50 feet. So the design standard here, the intent is to require articulation on these long side elevations, have some sort of variation in massing, avoiding big flat swaths of siding with no additional detail. And that's avoiding those like box-like massings that would likely be the default to build. So we've rewritten the text completely to read, when a front or side elevation exceeds a length of 50 feet, vertical breaks or offsets to reduce visual mass are required for 20% of the building elevation. So that allows for a little bit more flexible interpretation, ultimately on the part of the city zoning staff based on the design of the building. And then it allows the breaks or offset to be proportional to the building scale as opposed to a set dimension, which we think will actually generate better design in general. And so just in summary, these amendments are informed by, again, 18 months of application and a lot of analysis. And the aim here is to make some text amendments for clarity within the zoning standards and to make sure that we're in line with that intent of creating new middle housing standards that are consistent with the surrounding neighborhood. So just to refresh on the intent there, it's allowing for residential structures that have building footprints and overall scales comparable to single-family houses, and these neighborhood-scale housing forms that are compatible with housing in the surrounding area. So again, it's just one tool in the toolbox. It's specific to one single land use area. And the intent here is sort of incremental growth instead of maximizing what can be built on every single lot. The aim is not to have an outsized effect on one area of the city, because that's where these standards can be used, as just one small area of the city. And so again, the intent is incremental growth informed by these standards. And I am available for questions.
Thank you, Lindsay. Just as I guess a reminder, this, as you'd mentioned, I know it's over 18 months, but it came before us last month, but it got postponed. So we could get back with, there was some feedback from multiple people in the community and in the board of the realtors and those types of things. And I think you guys did a nice job incorporating those in here. A clarification too, I know that we narrowed up some of the lot widths as you had discussed, but we also removed the staff level variance. Is that accurate?
That's correct. We have removed the 20% administrative variation, and then we've adjusted those lot widths respondingly, at least for the first 4 forms on there. And the intent for removing that administrative variation, which we as staff, we stand by that. We feel pretty strongly about that because the way that the administrative variations were laid out, there was insufficient criteria for allowing or disallowing a variation, and it really left things to be somewhat subjective and inconsistent in the staff application of that. And so we feel that we've achieved a pretty good balance by dropping some of the lot widths there and then not creating any situation where staff could make kind of inconsistent determinations on that.
Yeah, consistency is very important, so thank you for doing that. Those are my comments. Anyway.
I don't know if this is the right place to bring this up because it kind of crosses over multiple items that we discussed at last Planning Commission. Some were postponed, some moved forward. Like it was a mixed bag, but after that, I just want to say for all, I was invited to look at some properties and talk to some individuals that were either against or had questions and that sort of thing. And I just wanted to share that I had had those conversations with those individuals just to gain some additional information.
Yeah, and that's great. And I think we probably ought to address that at the Thursday meeting as well. Yeah, I'd heard my schedule didn't allow me to make it out there for that. But I think we probably ought to just let the public know that we did, some of the members did attend. Next. Okay, we can move on to number 7.
Yes, we'll move on to number 7. We have Christina McGrons from the City Law Department here. She's going to cover this proposed code amendment. It's to align recent state law changes related to vesting. And she has provided you all with a couple handouts, which are in front of you.
Thank you, Amy. We're taking just a moment to get our technology loaded here. Okay. Just take a second. Oh, okay, interesting. For whatever reason, I can't see it on this screen, but I'm glad you all can see it over here. Well, as Amy said, I'm Christina McGrons-Tillery. I'm the staff attorney with the City of Knoxville Law Department who handles land use decisions. And I'm here to present to you on the proposal that we have in front of you for vested rights. As you all may be aware, the state legislature has made a change to the vested rights statute. That's at Tennessee Code Annotated 134310. And that's what's been prompting us to make these changes and bring them before you today. So in a nutshell, having vested rights basically means that the development regulations are frozen in place for a certain amount of time for a project. And the point when the regulations froze in place used to be when the city approved a building permit or some kind of a development plan. And there were different vesting periods depending on whether you were talking about a building permit or a single or multi-phased development plan. But the shortest vesting period used to be 1 year, and the longest period, given all the stages of the development, used to be 15. And we always are able to grant exceptions to that. Now the law has changed, and the point when the regulations freeze in place for the project is when the developer submits the documents to get that application going for a building permit or development plan approval. There's still different vesting periods depending on whether you're talking about a permit or a development plan, whether single or multi-phased. But now the shortest vesting period is now 3 years instead of 1 year. And the longest period is now in part tied to appeal rights that the developer and the public have. And I'll cover that in a little bit more detail momentarily. So the next question becomes, what is a submission and when does it count for legal purposes? So a submission has to be a complete application for approval for a building permit or the development plan, and it also should be in substantial compliance with the zoning code. Then the next question is, well, what does substantial compliance mean? So the departments of policy, law, planning, and plans review and building inspections all came together, and we drafted this definition in blue for substantial compliance. A complete application is the first requirement, and then meeting the list below. I want to highlight a few of those. Parts 1 and 3 that no variances would be needed, because obviously if a variance is needed, you're not really in substantial compliance. Proposing nothing that the zoning code prohibits. It also covers in parts 2 and 6 some special cases, like where special use approval might be needed, or some kind of approval for a board like the DRB or Historic Zoning Commission, which would become vested once they got a recommendation for approval from the planning staff members. And then other proposals in 4 and 5, which kind of by their nature don't comply with the zoning code. And one good example of that being the expansion of a non-conforming use, which is actually under a Board of Zoning Appeals review. So we also made general edits, obviously, mainly to change the date of the vesting, which is now required under state law. We also added a section J, where the zoning administrator is able to make decisions under the status of vested rights, and that anybody aggrieved by that decision is able to appeal it per Article 1612. We also made some minor housekeeping edits, and that was mainly just to match up the terminology between our ordinance and the state law for clarity and consistency purposes. So to give the zoning administrator the authority to make those decisions, we had to make an amendment also to section 14.4 that lists the powers of the zoning administrator. And then, as I mentioned earlier, the expiration of vested rights now in part depends on when appeal rights are alive versus when they expire. Currently in our zoning code, we don't have an expiration on the appeal deadline for administrative decisions. Previously, we didn't have the ability to let the public review permits approved online, but now, thanks to some recent technology changes, we do have that ability. So this certainly is a much better time to propose one. And I'll say too, not having an appeal deadline has caused some issues on both sides. For developers, you can imagine that the uncertainty of having a project approved, but then never having a deadline on the neighborhood or the public being able to file an appeal causes quite a bit of uncertainty. For neighborhoods, there's also a level of uncertainty caused by the fact that there could be an approved project out there with vested rights, but then years go by without it being built. Obviously, as years go on, you have development pattern changes and expectations that change as well for the area. So working together, we came up with this proposed wording for an appeal deadline. Simply put, this is a 30-day deadline, which mirrors Chattanooga and Nashville's existing codes. For the applicant developer, there's 30 days for when the denial is received that they can appeal. And for the public, the 30 days begins when the permit is issued and that notice is published online. Note that the building permit captures interpretations that are made along the way in the application review and approval process, so that would be all captured in the date that the building permit notice is published and available online. And as I mentioned, we do now have the technology that allows that to offer the public a searchable database for issued permits. And I wanted to spend just a moment showing that to you. This is the city's plans review and building inspections homepage. And with the red arrow and the underlined in yellow sections, you'll see 2 links, one for permit search and one for building data report. This is the first one for the permit search link. This is basically going to cover what most people want to see, which is what's happening nearby. I see something starting to go up, or I see some kind of a sign out there. I want to know what's happening in my neighborhood. As you can see, this is a tool that allows you to search for issued permits based on either the address, the parcel ID, or even a range of street addresses. And this is our, building data report link. This allows you to search for issued permits anywhere in the city. And I'll say that third drop-down box that you see right here allows you to filter based on the year. So you're able to pull up, if you wanted to, the entirety of, say, 2024 or 2025 permits issued anywhere in the city and be able to make decisions based on what you see there. And both links are updated in real time. So with that, I'll entertain any questions from you all. Appreciate your time.
Okay, thank you, Christina. Now we'll move on to agenda item number 11. Get the computer set up here. This is 8C25RZ. Staff is recommending denial of this request.
So it looks like we are continuing to have technical difficulties. Sorry about that. This is a city rezoning request to rezone a 1.43 acre parcel in the Summit Hill area on West Vine Avenue from the downtown Knoxville Grid Subdistrict to the downtown Knoxville Boulevard Subdistrict. The case is 8C25RZ. The property is located just west of South Gay Street, and in this consideration, the hillside protection overlay would be retained. This property is part of a larger DKG district along West Vine and South Gay Street. There's also DKB along the boulevard of West Summit Hill Drive, and the DKW or warehouse subdistrict is to the north. In downtown Knoxville, there is an ongoing surge of residential and commercial redevelopment occurring. This includes 4 projects that are underway within a 250-foot radius of the subject property. The image on the right is the Lone Tree Pass mixed-use development, which is replacing a surface parking lot at 255 South Gay Street. It'll provide 24,000 square feet of commercial space, 57 condos, and a pedestrian corridor, which you see there, that spans the center of the project from West Vine Avenue to Summit Hill Drive. The image at the bottom left is a new public sculpture at the Cradle of Country Music Park designed to enhance engagement with the space. The top left image is an open request for qualifications from KCDC for a major mixed-use redevelopment of the McClung warehouse site and surface parking lot at West Jackson Avenue to the north. At the corner of West Vine Avenue and Locust Street, there's a 5-story, 89-unit apartment building called City Summit, which is under construction now. This is on a property that was rezoned from DKG to DKB in 2022, which is the same request before you on the subject property. As you can see, it is exclusively residential with no mixed-use public features. This highlights a key distinction between the DKG zone and the requested DKB, which is that the ground floor of a development cannot be solely residential in DKG, but it can in DKB. The site where the City Summit Apartments are and that 2022 rezoning occurred is circled in red. It's highly visible from and quickly accessible to West Summit Hill Drive, which is a proper boulevard as it's described in the code and the downtown design guidelines. The subject property circled in purple abuts a core commercial corridor to the east and north, and it's situated diagonally from that new Lone Tree Pass development, which is in green, and it will feature retail commercial spaces with enhanced pedestrian connectivity to West Vine Avenue. This context doesn't support a rezoning to the DKB district on the subject property because DKG is better suited to support a continuation of this mixed-use pedestrian-oriented development trend that was intended for the area. The DKB district is designed to accommodate areas along wide planted boulevards with a green, open landscaping and areas like West Summit Hill Drive. The subject property is addressed on West Vine Avenue, which, as you can see in the bottom right image, is a one-way, single-lane street with no consistent street landscaping. So this is not the intended context for DKB zoning. Rezoning this property to DKB would be inconsistent with the intent of the district and the mixed-use vision for the grid street areas of downtown. West Vine Avenue is not a boulevard, and the zoning code is intentional about this context for the DKB zone. This property is adjacent to an active commercial corridor, and the Lone Tree Pass development further enhances the pedestrian experience there. The downtown design guidelines encourage first-floor uses that draw walk-in traffic and mixed-use buildings with apartments over lower-story commercial uses. They also describe the Boulevard District as being intended for automobile-oriented thoroughfares with medians and street trees. And so for these reasons, staff recommends denial of this rezoning request. I'm happy to answer any questions.
I'm just trying to refresh myself. I remember the State Street case that was similar to this a year or so ago. Does DKG require commercial-oriented property along the entirety of the ground floor, or is it a portion of the ground floor? And I know I can look that up, too. And if this is more appropriate to discuss on Thursday, happy to do that as well.
Yeah, my understanding is that there has to be a public mixed-use component on the ground floor. And for more details, I may defer to plans review and inspections on how that's interpreted and enforced.
Okay.
I'll do the same if this is more appropriate for Thursday. Just tell me to ask then. But for that stretch of Vine, is there any mixed-use, non-residential at the moment, or is that anticipated strictly from the Lone Tree development?
Yeah, the Lone Tree development is a significant expansion along West Vine. Other than that, I think I have that image. You can see in the bottom right, there's surface parking, there is a prominent historic church. But no, and there's sidewalks on both sides.
Yeah,
But no active commercial beyond the Lone Tree Pass.
okay, thanks.
With the topography being the way it is, it makes sense to me to be more creative on this piece of property, because like first floor is, I'm stuck, because, I do think it's a great place for something to happen, but I just don't see it as retail. I see it more as, a nice, I don't know, the property's so unique, I don't know what it's for, but I do think that it could be made into, some really nice residential development.
We're probably starting to get into a little bit of deliberation.
Oh,
If we could
okay,
save some of
okay.
this
Well,
for Thursday.
I'm sorry.
Yeah, that's okay. That's okay. I mean, they're all good points. We just need to,
Yeah, I
I think probably
drifted.
need to bring it into.
And just to clarify, like retail doesn't have to be the mixed-use component.
Okay, thank you. Oh, I'm sorry, I
Thank you.
lost my head for a second.
Okay, we'll move on to agenda item number 27, which is a plan development request.
Yes, so the Galbraith, so this is 8A25 PD. The Galbraith School Adaptive Reuse Plan Development is located on a former elementary school at 4333 Galbraith School Road. This is located between South Doyle Middle School and the greater South Woodlawn neighborhood. 3 exceptions from the property's RN1 zoning district are requested to enable the renovation of this building for 36 multifamily units and 8 additional townhouses. The Galbraith School building was erected in 1930 and designed by architect Frank O. Barber. The building has remained vacant since the 1980s after the school was closed in 1977. This planned development seeks to preserve and restore this historic structure for 36 affordable dwellings comprised of 1, 2, and 3-bedroom units. A second phase of the proposal is to develop 8 townhouses on cleared open space in the southeast area of this 2.6-acre lot. There will be a strong emphasis on public art with a classroom-inspired mural on a portion of the school's exterior, alongside other artistic programming intended to enhance engagement and aesthetics of this long vacant school campus. The following 3 exceptions from the zoning code are requested to accomplish this project: increasing the impervious surface maximum in the RN1 district from 40% to 51%, permitting the use of multifamily and townhouse dwellings, and permitting more than one principal structure on the site. Staff analyzed these exceptions and determined that the impervious footprint on this campus has long exceeded the 40% maximum. The site plan indicates that proposed development will largely stay within areas that have been previously paved. Permitting more intensive residential uses will enable the redevelopment and rehabilitation of this dilapidated school campus in a way that single-family development under RN1 cannot. And then permitting another principal use with the addition of a modest amount of townhouses will activate an empty area of this vacant lot and provide a transition of residential intensity between the South Doyle Middle School campus and multifamily units and the single-family lots to the south and southeast. Exceptions to the zoning regulation cannot be granted unless the applicant demonstrates a substantial benefit to the city. The project enumerates two benefits: the preservation and adaptive reuse of a historic building in need of restoration, and the addition of public art and murals are also proposed to enhance community surroundings and to be enjoyed by both residents and neighbors. Staff determined that the preservation of this historic structure is a cultural benefit to the city that could not be ensured through any other means in the zoning ordinance. If this property were rezoned to RN5 to permit the exceptions being requested, this would in no way prevent this building from being demolished. This type of public benefit cannot be easily accomplished through other means in the zoning code, and that's what the plan development process was specifically designed to support. Staff recommend that a historic zoning overlay also be considered on the property to further ensure this historic preservation effort. The incorporation of public art and creative programming throughout the property indicates that there will be public engagement and beautification beyond the rehabilitation work, and this enhances the proposal and aligns with the types of benefits described in the code. Input from the city's Urban Design and Development Division is critical to this consideration of public benefit. This team evaluates projects for their alignment with the city's key development priorities, and they've substantiated the public benefit of this proposal with a letter of support, which is provided as Exhibit A in the case package. Staff recommend approval of the plan development because it's an innovative rehabilitation project that cannot be easily insured through other means in the code. The public benefits are substantial given the limited zoning exceptions requested, and this is validated by support from the city. The plan development proposes replacing the broken asphalt parking lot with a gravel parking lot, which can make accessibility on the site challenging. So we're proposing 3 conditions for approval. ADA compliant parking spaces are shown, and one condition for approval is that ADA spaces and access aisles remain paved. Another condition is that a secondary paved ADA crosswalk be provided to connect the townhouses to the main building and courtyard. The driveway to Galbraith School Road must also be paved at least 10 feet inside the property line to prevent loose gravel from littering the street. And the gravel must be dust-free, clean stone, and bound on all sides to prevent migration and rutting, which typically requires a grid framework installation. So these conditions improve safety, access, and long-term viability of the site. And I'm happy to answer any questions.
I had a quick question. I'm still trying to wrap my head around the plan development stuff. Did you say it was going to be lower income or some sort of subsidized?
That's not one of the stated benefits, but I think that's something that's being worked through with other departments in the city.
Okay, but that is something that would be factored in as a public benefit if it was nailed down?
I think it is a benefit that's listed in the code.
Okay.
And they're using the gravel because it's a permeable surface, is that right? Can they not, is that why they're doing that?
More permeable than asphalt, but it's also lower cost to replace. I'm not sure what the rationale is for replacing the parking lot with gravel. I can say that the parking lot in its current state is very dilapidated and would need to be completely redone.
Yeah, I guess it'd be nice to have like a paver or something that doesn't track all that gravel out.
Well, so there would need to be some sort of grid installation for the gravel. It would need to be clean stone. There would need to be paving for ADA accessibility and along the driveway as well.
Okay, thanks.
I had a question just about the density. Did I hear right that there's kind of an increased density request as part of the exception? Is it?
So yeah, the permitting of multifamily and townhouse.
Okay. And I guess, again, kind of just trying to think about plan development conversations we've had recently. Like, I know this is RN1, like under what zoning would the requested density, I guess, be kind of granted as of right? Is it more akin to like an RN2 or RN3?
In terms of the density, it's like an RN4 or RN5.
Okay.
One thing I can say that I didn't get into, but is described in the report, is that the future land use classification is civic institutional, which permits some pretty intensive uses. So if this were to be rezoned institutional to better align with the future land use plan, You could have a hospital or a detention center or other really intensive uses permitted by right. So that was part of the consideration with this as well.
All right, thank you.
I just had a question about you said the grid system, and I've seen a type of system that it has lots of little circles. Is this the grid system that you're talking about?
I'll defer to city engineering on how to describe
It's like
that.
circles that kind of hold the gravel in place a little bit more?
Yes, that is a type of system. It's not the required system, but we do see that proposed often.
Okay.
Thank you, Jesse. Now we're going to move on to agenda item number 24. Before we do that, I do apologize. The PBA has come in and looked at the screens and is not able to fix the ones that are facing the audience, so I do apologize for that. And hopefully the ones that we're on will come back on here in a minute. And there is one that was at the back of the room to my left that was working. Did I say 14? No. 14.
All right. So this is item 14, 8-H25RZ. This is a request to rezone a 1.94 acre parcel located at 4831 Tillery Road from RN1 Single Family Residential to RN2 Single Family Residential. The hillside protection overlay would be retained. Staff recommendation is to deny the RN2 zoning district because the subject property does not have adequate access to support rezoning of this site. The primary difference between the RN1 and RN2 zoning districts are the dimensional standards. The minimum lot size in the RN1 district is 10,000 square feet, whereas in RN2 it is 5,000 square feet. If the subject property were subdivided in the future, the new lots would require a shared driveway to access Tillery Road. The shared driveway would be located very close to the intersection of Ferris Drive from the north, which is a safety concern as the proximity of the shared driveway could conflict with the intersection, particularly for vehicles turning left on Tillery Road from Ferris Drive. For these reasons, increasing residential intensity at this location would not be appropriate, and it would be inconsistent with the General Plan's Development Policy 9.3 to ensure the context of new development does not impact existing neighborhoods. Are there any questions?
Okay, we'll move on to agenda item number 15.
Okay. This is a request to rezone a .91 acre parcel located on Wilson Road, north of Peltier Road, from RN1 Single Family Residential to RN2 Single Family Residential. This site is within an established neighborhood that has remained largely unchanged over the last 30 years outside of the intermittent construction of single-family dwellings. The limited rezonings that have occurred in the immediate area are not recent and date back to the 1980s and 90s. The subject property is near a bend on Wilson Road that appears to have limited visibility due to the curvature of the road from the west. Any proposed new lot within the city of Knoxville is required to have adequate site distance, so should the lot be subdivided, site distance verification would need to be obtained. This section of Wilson Road has also experienced a disproportionate number of automobile accidents between 2020 and 2024. The subject property's future driveways would likely be within 200 feet of the bend where most of the crashes have occurred, likely due to limited visibility. As I mentioned earlier, the primary difference between the RN1 and RN2 districts are the dimensional standards. Again, RN1 requires a minimum lot area of 10,000 square feet, whereas RN2 requires 5,000 square feet. The subject property's location near a blind curve on Wilson Road, coupled with the significant number of automobile-related crashes and the lack of changing conditions in the area, does not support increasing residential intensity at this site. For these reasons, staff recommendation is to deny the RN2 single-family residential neighborhood zoning district. Are there any questions?
Okay, seeing none, we'll move on to the next item, number 37.
Okay, so this is a request to rezone a 6.6 acre parcel located on East Emery Road, just west of Beeler Road, from agricultural to planned residential with up to 5 dwelling units an acre. Staff recommendation is to approve the PR zone with up to 4 dwelling units an acre because it is consistent with the Knox County Comprehensive Plan and surrounding development. The subject property is within the planned growth area of the Growth Policy Plan and designated rural conservation in the Comprehensive Plan. Rural conservation areas are intended to conserve natural areas by clustering development and minimizing land disturbance. Pockets of rural conservation and growth areas indicate places that may be subject to development similar to the adjacent place types, but where more compact site design is expected. The subject property borders a swath of the suburban residential place type from the west and south. The recommended density of 4 dwelling units an acre would permit development that is compatible with the surrounding area and allow for a transition in land use intensity between the suburban residential development patterns supported by the SR place type and the less dense conservation-oriented development characterized by the RC place type. The recommended density of 4 dwelling units an acre also complies with the Comprehensive Plan Implementation Policy 9 to coordinate infrastructure improvements with development. So this section of East Emery Road between Maynardville Pike and Tazewell Pike was identified for widening from 2 to 5 lanes in the 2017 TDOT Improvement Act. This is because of high traffic volumes in this area as well as some of the higher crash rates. However, TDOT has since released a 10-year project plan that does not include funding for this project and is on hold with no definitive schedule for construction. As such, the recommended density of 4 dwelling units an acre would be more appropriate here, as it would permit residential development that is better suited to the current infrastructure along this section of East Emery Road. So we heard from the applicant earlier this morning that they intend to potentially request an amended density of 4.2 dwelling units an acre, but that is still depending. It was just a potential option that they mentioned they might bring up at the Planning Commission meeting. Are there any questions?
I don't know if you can say it, if the 4.2 is what is presented on Thursday, do we have a sense of whether that's something that staff would recommend?
So I found out kind of walking into agenda review,
Okay.
so we hadn't assessed that request.
Totally fair.
Okay, now we will move on to number 24.
Okay. This is a request for a branch bank in the North Shore Town Center development. The branch bank would include a drive-through facility, and the part of this component or request is alternative compliance with the TC1 zoning standards, which I'll explain in a moment. A quick summary, it's a one-story structure, 4,000 square feet, approximately 4,000 square feet, 2 drive-through lanes and a bypass lane that's between the building and the road. There are 17 parking spaces to the side of the structure, that's for the bank, and then there's 19 parking spaces to the rear of the property that are for the adjacent 3-story office structure. Just clarify, the adjacent property is also ORNL. It's a 3-story office building. They would be moving the branch within that structure to this building. That's their intent. The project includes a continuation of the boardwalk along the lake, which would be on the rear of the property here, and includes open spaces and pedestrian connections to the bank. So it includes a pedestrian connection directly from the road, from the adjacent drive aisle, and to the boardwalk, and then also to the undeveloped part of the property that is not proposed for anything at this point. Quick overview of the location of the site. So as you can see, outlined is the entire North Shore Town Center development. The blue area is the subject site, and again, this is a little bit more zoomed in, where the 3-story existing ORNL structure is just to the south. Town Center Boulevard is on the east side of the property. Just a quick look at what the existing streetscape looks like. Top left is the O&L structure you can see on the left side of the image, and then this site is just straight ahead. And the image directly is on the bottom right is what's directly across the street from the proposed site. Just a real quick overview of what we're talking about. So the town center zoning is in the old zoning code. It was in the former zoning code. It's not in the new zoning code because this was or is a former planned district. The old town center zoning still applies to this property, as well as its development plan that was approved at the time. Just wanted to give a quick overview of zoning history on the site. Originally, the property was entirely zoned town center. In 2000, so it was back in 2001, it was rezoned to town center. In 2004, it had its development plan approved, but in 2010, a portion of the property was rezoned to planned commercial with conditions. The conditions essentially require that the planned commercial development be done in a way that's similar to the town center. So, and it got its own design guidelines. Another smaller portion of the property was zoned to RP2 with conditions similar to that, just that it be done similar to the town center zoning. The subject site is here, still in the town center, TC1 zoning. So the town center zoning general description, just to make it simple, is to encourage the creation of pedestrian-oriented mixed-use urban developments. It goes on to say to promote attractive functional development that is compatible with residential development other than commercial zoning, then more compatible with residential development than other commercial zoning districts. And then alternative compliance, which is an option within the town center zoning. If you cannot meet the strict interpretation of the zoning district, alternative compliance allows you to propose a development that foster innovative, high-quality, environmental, sustainable development that meets the intent of the pedestrian-oriented mixed-use district. So it really doesn't give much criteria beyond that. That's what it says. So the requested zoning modifications are to allow a drive-through to be located to the front of the structure and to the side of the structure. Just to give you an idea, so again, the structure's here. The drive-through lanes go between the structure and the road. And then it has 2 lanes that go to automated teller machines, and then a bypass lane, which is all this is to the side. The actual teller machines are mostly to the rear of the structure. So I'd say that's not necessarily the concern here. It's more about the rest of the facility. And then the other part of it is to allow parking to the side. The zoning, TC1 zoning allows or requires all surface parking to be to the rear of the structure. So if you just, the applicant's request in their explanation of how they comply with the intent of alternative compliance is in appendix or exhibit B on the staff report. Just a really quick look at the development plan and standards approved for North Shore Town Center. Just kind of gives you an imagery of what was intended to be built. Doesn't require multi-story structures, but single-story structures are limited in size. It shows streetscapes with buildings built up close to the road and so on. I'm not going to go over this too much, but this is the site on the original concept plan or illustrative master plan. It does show smaller structures, kind of more centralized in the site, but it's all plazas and boardwalk around it, so there's no parking or drive aisles. Essentially, parking is under the structures. In 2011, there was a separate design guidelines approved for the PC section that shows how the town center zoning would also be kind of changed, but even in that newer version, still showed structures closer to the road and more of an urban style development. This is that newer illustrative master plan, as you could call it. Again, showing structures along the road and then more like detached or independent structures towards the lake with parking in between. And this is just an overlay of the site plan in relation to the existing development and how it relates to the road and other projects across the road. One of the items the applicant has noted as a reason why they put the building where it is because of a sewer line easement, has a sewer line in it, which you can see in this orange color here. That easement was created in 2009. In 2010, they asked for a rezoning for part of the property, PC1. 2011, there was a new development plan, what you see here, which shows the structure right along the road. So they, I guess, the sewer line that they designed was not appropriately located. Again, this is kind of showing that easement coming through the property. This is their property here. There's no evident reason why that sewer line couldn't be relocated behind the structure. That's obviously something that's an engineering issue. So I'll talk to the utility district and see if that's even feasible, have their own design done, but just looking at it from two dimensions, this seems feasible. Staff recommendation is deny the request for the alternative compliance because it is not consistent or does not meet the purpose and intent of the alternative compliance of the TC1 zoning or the development standards, development planning standards for North Shore.
Does anybody have any questions? Okay. Thank you, Mike. We are going to move on to agenda item number 10, which is a rezoning, 7025RZ.
This rezoning request is to go from RN4 to RN5 for a 4-acre property at the intersection of Washington Pike and Millertown Pike, south of I-640. The property was rezoned from RN1 to RN4 in 2023. It is bounded by smaller residential properties with RN1 and RN2 district on 3 sides. The office-zoned property to the east is a church. The broader area is experiencing modest residential growth, including the 156-unit multifamily development on Washington Pike. And there is also an under construction 160-unit multifamily development on Millertown Pike, closer to I-640, which is not visible on this map. While the area is experiencing modest residential growth, these changes do not warrant a rezoning to the more intense RN5 district. Large residential developments in the broader area are occurring along the edge of the neighborhood near the I-640 interchange on properties zoned commercial. The existing RN4 district's maximum lot size requirement of 40,000 square feet discourages large apartment complexes that are incompatible with surrounding houses. The proposed rezoning will also eliminate the requirement of public hearing and special use approval by the Planning Commission for almost any townhouse or multifamily development. The relative location of Washington Pike to the north is not ideal for additional number of units that could be accommodated by the RN5 district. Because of this reason, staff recommends denial of the RN5 district. happy to answer any questions, or I have some additional slides, so I can also go by if you have any questions.
Okay, thank you, Samuel. We will switch over to Ms. Warner, number 36, 7M25RZ. This is an item that came before you last year. In December, I believe, of 2024.
So this request is going from PR up to 2 dwelling units an acre to 7 dwelling units an acre. The previous request from December was agricultural to PR up to 6 dwelling units an acre. That's on 11.16 acres on North Woodall Road, just north of Asheville Highway. So in December of 2024, a rezoning application was submitted for PR up to 6, from A to PR up to 6 was submitted. Planning staff and this body recommended approval of PR up to 6. However, County Commission has the final approval, and they recommended a lesser density of up to 2 dwelling units an acre. And that was approved in March of this year. And they cited the East County Community Plan, which limits development to properties with direct access to major thoroughfares. So in this case, Asheville Highway. This property is approximately a quarter mile away from the corridor and is designated rural in that plan. Since the last rezoning request, there's been no change in conditions to warrant another rezoning to increase density. Development trends in this area have been primary residential and commercial. Since about the 1980s, there's been a steady transition of agricultural to commercial along Asheville Highway and residential in the area. The place type on this property is suburban residential, and that does allow consideration of PR up to 7 dwelling units an acre. It's also in the urban growth boundary, so it's in compliance with the growth boundary. The applicant did submit some comments online saying they're requesting 4.5 dwelling units an acre now. That would allow approximately 50 dwelling units on the property. We have not looked at that request. We looked at the submittal of 7 dwelling units an acre, and the recommendation is to deny, as there have been no change in conditions since the last application. Any questions?
Thank you, Whitney. Okay, now we'll move on to agenda items number 30 and 31. These are appeals. Is there another one that I'm overlooking? Okay. These are appeals of staff's decision to deny 2 middle housing applications.
All right, 1 second.
Oh, that's your desktop, isn't it?
Yeah.
Why is it on
Sorry, 1 moment while we have some technical difficulties.
Can I ask a question while you're, I just want to make sure that I'm looking at the, because we don't see this terribly often, and there's not a traditional case file starting this. It starts with appeal of decision, and is that what I should be seeing? Okay.
Okay, thank you. So number 30 and 31 are appeals of planning staff denials related to the middle housing standards. I'm going to introduce both projects, and then discuss the reasons for the staff denial to save time. So 8B 25OB is at 1214 Callaway Street. That's a lot that was rezoned by the applicant against the staff recommendation from RN2 to RN4 in August 2024. It does not conform to the lot width or area for the RN4 zone. The current block is characterized by single-story historic shotgun houses on extremely narrow lots. You can see the context of the block in the photo from Street View in the bottom right. And we have seen applications and appeals for this property. So this is another iteration of that. The project is described as a multiplex in the application. And you can see the site plan and elevation drawings here. So the project is designed with 5 units separated by shared sidewalls, which actually meets the townhouse large type and townhouse style construction as well. They are 2.5 stories with side massings that cantilever an extra 1 foot out from the building on both sides. There are 4 units facing the side elevations and then 1 facing the street. And to go back to the stats there, so for example, comparison, if this lot were not a non-conforming lot of record, if it adhered to the middle housing standards, 70-foot wide lots are required for multiplexes. And then for a 5-unit townhouse, a 90-foot wide lot would be required. However, the application uses that Article 17.3.b to allow development of a non-conforming lot of record, and in this application, it's with the largest type of middle housing. 8C 25OB is at 1403 Moses Avenue. This is a lot zoned RN2 with the hillside protection overlay. The block is characterized by 1 to 1.5 story buildings with elevated basements. There's an extensive slope on the property. The lot itself is extremely narrow. You can see it in the street view there between the 2 houses. It's 25 feet wide. So again, the application benefits from being a non-conforming lot of record. A 45-foot wide lot would be required for a triplex with an alley, and a 54-foot wide lot would be required for 3 units of townhouses with an alley. And so you can see the drawings there. And then similar to the previous appeals, you have seen the denial relates foremost to the intent of the middle housing standards. So just to reiterate some of those, as we've already discussed today, the Article 4.6 says the standards are intended to promote the development of neighborhood scale housing forms that are compatible with existing housing in the surrounding area. The design standards intend to generate new middle housing buildings that are similar in footprint, height, and setbacks with the existing neighborhood. Middle housing is not intended to maximize what is possible on a single lot, and it's not intended to generate new middle housing or new housing forms that are incompatible with the neighborhood context. The application also points to some of the discrepancies in the middle housing types that we've discussed associated with the code amendments. So as we discussed in the annual report and last month, the types, in particular the townhouse or the triplexes and multiplexes, have unintended ambiguity that was included when the text was drafted that has allowed applicants to interpret both types as townhouses with shared walls in order to maximize what can fit on a lot. So for both of these applications, you can see in the drawings there, the applications don't meet the intent or standards of either type. It's not quite a townhouse, and it's not quite a multiplex or triplex. Our townhouse standards are drafted to include the townhouse units to be facing the street with ground level entries and narrow sides of the elevations facing the street and oriented towards that streetscape. This is to avoid what Opticos has called slot homes, which is a type of perpendicular facing townhouse. And in general, the understanding is these don't deliver any sort of attainability or livability. They generate low-quality outdoor spaces for the homes. They tend to loom over the adjacent neighbors because they're taller than the context. And their primary windows face the houses next door. They are typically 4 to 6 feet from the side lot lines, and they don't interact with the street in the same way as townhouses. So again, just to run through those are the intent of the standards, and in making administrative decisions here, alongside the standards, especially when the application does not clearly meet all of those zoning standards and it kind of remains in that gray area of most of them, planners are forced to say, you know, can we justify approving this administratively? Is it in line with the intent of the standards? Is this what was presented and expected from the community when we presented this a year ago? And when it is not in line and it does not meet those standards, that's what results in the denial. And then those appeals can be taken to the appointed body to make those decisions. So I'm available for questions.
I think that's all we had on the agenda today. Unless anybody has any questions, we will be adjourned. Thank you.